Have you ever walked into a room and completely forgotten why you went in there? I know I have. Today's guest says that's exactly what retirement feels like for millions of Americans. Well, we're going to talk about how to fix that. Join me on Wealth on the Move, the podcast, where we talk with Bonnie Treichel, co author of Your Retirement Sketchbook. Check out this episode of Wealth on the Move, the podcast. Your life journey doesn't stand still, and neither should your wealth. Welcome to Wealth on the Move, the podcast. Welcome back to another episode of Wealth on the Move, the podcast. I'm your host, Will Hoffman, founder and president of Hoffman Wealth Management. And, traversing this profession of financial planning, it's always great when I meet other professionals who see the financial profession through the same lens that I do. And listen, the topics that we're discussing, the scenarios that we're describing, the strategies that we're introducing to folks, it can be intense. It can be confusing. It can be a lot of information at once. And the perfect quote in the book that we're going to talk about and the author we're going to talk to today sums this up perfectly. Have you ever walked into a room and completely forgotten why you went in there? I know I've done it. I have just blamed it on old age or being a busy father, but they compared that that's exactly what retirement feels like for millions of people, because they get there, they think they know why they're doing this, why they're ready to go. And then unfortunately, they forget why they're there and they forget what to do and they're lost. But today we're going to talk about how to fix that. Today I have Bonnie Treichel. Bonnie is one of the co-authors of the Retirement Sketchbook. And I'm excited for you all to listen to how she describes retirement. If you're watching this on YouTube, hopefully we can get some images built into the recording that shows exactly what she means by sketchbook. But without further ado, Bonnie, welcome to Wealth on the Move, the podcast.
Awesome. Well, Will, thank you so much for hosting me. I'm really excited to be here and to talk and chat with you and to share a little bit more about your retirement sketchbook.
Yes, thank you so much. Before we get deep into that, let's talk a little bit about your career, your past, how you came to write this book. So let's give our listeners first an introduction to who Bonnie is.
Absolutely. Well, I am a small business owner. I have a consulting firm that is for financial advisors, and I have a law firm that works with financial advisors and other intermediaries. And I also work with some employers who have 401k plans or employer-sponsored plans. So I started my small business around 5 years ago. And part of that mission was that I was very focused on how do we take complicated things, make them simple, and make the legal advice more available to advisors and their clients so that people have access to workplace plans. So I do a lot on the workplace plan side because I'm really interested in making sure that a lot of savings starts for most Americans with their workplace plan.
Yes.
And so the idea of how do we empower people to have access to workplace savings is really a part of my mission and vision. So that's what brings me along the way. And really what led me to some of the ideas for the book is thinking about how do we make things easy for people? How do we want people to actually engage and feel when they think about their future in retirement?
Okay. And you guys cover 125 different topics that you write about, but then you also illustrate, which I know when we are working with our clients, and a lot of times we will think we nail this description of a Roth conversion, for example, or how an inherited IRA works or something. And we look across the table and unfortunately it's just a blank stare back, and they want to understand, but they don't. And the best mechanism I have found to solve that when we're in that scenario is to go right to my whiteboard in our conference room and draw exactly what I'm talking about. So when I saw Your Retirement Sketchbook, to me, it was a welcome, refreshing change of pace for folks to really be able to grasp these concepts, and for us to have a mechanism to keep in our office to show, listen, this is what we're talking about. Look at this sketch that Bonnie's done for us already. So it's been a welcome change of pace.
Well, I love that you're already embracing the concept of visualization because I think not everyone is.
Right.
And I think one of the reasons I think some people don't embrace it is they say, well, I can't draw. And so this idea of drawing a visual on the whiteboard in front of a client, that's pretty intimidating. But I would say for anyone listening who's a financial advisor, or really anyone, it's embracing progress over perfection. It's
Right.
embracing just the art of, doing the activity of writing something, the visual. That's part of the exercise. It can be a terrible stick figure. I was in a client meeting yesterday and I just grabbed my notepad and like drew a circle and started, because we didn't have a
Yes.
whiteboard. But I wanted them not just to hear me say it, I wanted them to see it. And I think we know from many things, Will, we were talking before about, you're quite the athlete. And when you think about athletics and running a race, what are you taught to do? You're taught to visualize the finish line,
Right.
so visualizations can do a lot for us. Number one, they can help us understand complex topics, particularly things like movement of money. Those types of things you can really achieve by being able to use some sort of picture drawing. But likewise, visualization also helps us because if we can actually see that future, if we can have the picture of what that actually is, write it down, not just write the goal, but draw the goal and see it, we're
Right.
more likely to achieve that goal. Just like with sports or other things, where, there's a stat out there about how people will save 40% more if they really understand or are in touch with their future self because they know what they're doing it for.
Right.
So there's many reasons why this visualization activity makes a lot of sense.
Well, it takes me back to my accounting class when I was in college. And one of my favorite professors started the entire semester's class with, and I'm sure he didn't say this, there has to be somebody famous that said this first. Probably it's got to be a philosopher, but I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. And unfortunately, when it comes to retirement, you only get to do it once. So you're only going to really understand it as your lived experience is mapping out retirement. But hearing a financial advisor explain this to you, you're going to forget it. So at the
Mhm.
very least, if you can see it, you're going to remember the conversation. And I'm always hopeful that when folks are back at their kitchen table trying to rehash our meeting, they say, don't you remember when Will drew that and how it gets, how the taxes are withheld from the RMD before it gets to us? It's very easy to explain that with a drawing versus just saying, well, we're going to withhold the tax. What does that mean? I don't remember that. No, but when you see it, you remember what is going to happen. So then when it does happen, now you understand. So next year's RMD isn't going to be nearly as jarring.
I love that you said back at the kitchen table because one of the motivations for the book was, you know, I grew up in a small Midwestern town, and my parents, they didn't come from financial services. My parents, they're not lawyers. And so when I think about learning about money and finances, we didn't talk about money, politics, and religion because
Right.
that's impolite. Like ladies don't do that. And one of my visions for the book is that this becomes more of the conversation. It is, I've described it many times as a dinner table book. So it's able to be picked up, put down. And like you said, you want to encourage people to go home and have that conversation around the dinner table. We want to encourage people to start doing it with kids at a younger age, to do it, younger couples before they get married or early on in their marriage. And then even, think about, we're probably at that age where when we think about taking care of aging parents,
Right.
again, thinking about that generation up as well. So that was a big part of it is having something that is a tool or resource to pick up and put down, but really think about that around the dinner table.
The way you guys open the book, and really the first two images hit me hard. The second one I want to talk about in a second, but the first one really gets into the psychology of retirement when you reference and call it rewirement. And being in this profession for 23 years and holding the hands of many people as they leave the workforce and enter into retirement, I love that phrase rewirement because now it requires a whole different type of thinking. And the way we explain it to our clients, accumulation's easy. You save, we're taught to not even look at it. save until it hurts, and then save a little bit more after that. The market's going to do what the market's going to do. Ignore it, ignore the noise, just keep saving. And then you get to the point where you need this money, that this money is going to be how you travel the world, how you enjoy your retirement, and the thinking needs to change. And that phrase rewirement is really incredible. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you came up with that and how that ties into the psychology of retiring?
Yeah, and I have to credit my co-author with that one. So,
Okay.
co-author Jamie Hopkins, he's used the term rewirement for a while. He has another book that was published before this one, and again talked about rewirement, really thinking about changing that mindset. It's funny. I was working on an article last night, and two of the big things that I talked about is there's two problems that you see coming up with financial advice. And one is too much focus on numbers and not enough focus on this rewirement
Yes.
concept, right? Like, we can't wait until someone turns 65 to start training them to think about how to live in retirement. We have to start that training process earlier because it isn't just flipping a switch. It really is a psychological shift. And it's not just about money, it's about a term someone used with me recently was CPR: community, purpose, and recreation. And,
I
it's
love that.
those three elements. Where are you getting them in retirement? So we've got to rewire our brain to be ready for that shift. The other thing, which you hit spot on, we have done a great job, and even the framework around the legislature has done a great job of helping people to think about the accumulation phase. People are very equipped for the accumulation phase. What people are not equipped for, though, is decumulation.
Right.
We help them. I heard this analogy recently, and it was about climbing Everest. More people actually die on the way down than on the way up, and it's because we equip people and think so much about that climb up, but really we got to think about that climb down as well, the decumulation side.
Yes. Yeah, without question. And the marketing that our profession doesn't help. And I'm sure you can remember. We're gonna hide the names to protect the innocent. Commercials 10 or 15 or 20 years ago of people walking around carrying their big number. And that was all they were focused on, was this is the number that I need. And they would walk around with this number, and it was we were focused on this number. We were focused on how much, how much, how much. And I've always said they never show what happens when you get to that number. They've
Mhm.
never talked about the decumulation of that process and how infinitely more intense that is than just getting to that number.
Yeah, and there's the decumulation process from the what are the tools and resources for taking money out of the various vehicles you have. So it is understanding what are all those components, but then to your point, how are we adjusting or rewiring our mindset to be prepared for that? One of the things that we talk about in the book as well is this concept of permission to spend. Again, we have to rewire our brains to understand that you've been in savings mode for years. Now you do have permission to spend, but helping people to also understand we have some populations that they still don't spend in retirement. They'll
Right.
never spend enough because they're afraid to. And then we have a different population that they've never been able to spend. So then all of a sudden they're spending a lot. So it's helping them think about some of these concepts like, dividing retirement into different phases. There's, the go go years, the slow go years, the no go years, or
Right.
concepts like that to start training people to think about what does that retirement phase look like? What are they going to do? Where are they going to live? Because it isn't one number. And that number needs to be dynamic because what happens when unexpected things happen in retirement? A lot of unexpected things can come up, right? We talk about the concept of silver divorce. What happens to the 70-year-old who gets divorced? People are living longer now. You're
Mhm.
seeing more divorces than ever before in that 65 plus category. So, what does that do to your retirement nest egg when suddenly you're divorced at 65 or 70?
Right. Well, and I'm of the opinion that this is going to get better because it's no doubt we get our financial habits from our parents and previous generations. And this concept of funding our own retirement, while we've been in this profession, our adult lives, it's still relatively new as far as a society goes. We just
Mm-hmm.
switched to the 401k in 1987. Before that, it was pensions and Social Security, where folks didn't have to make these decisions. The only time they had to make the decision was, when do I want my pension to start? When am I going to start Social Security? And that was it. Folks retiring now didn't watch their parents go through decumulation. They didn't watch them spend or govern their spending. They just watched them make the decision and, okay, tomorrow I don't have to go to work. Check will be here in the middle of the month. And now I get to just complain about living on a fixed income instead of worrying about decumulation. So I think that's going to get better. One, as our profession does a better job. And two, as folks start to watch previous generations go through these phases.
I think that's a good point because it is a newer wave of people, as we watch our parents and help them think about where are they finding purpose? How are they spending their money? And they are having to be more intentional and find advisors to partner with for those decisions. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah. And then we had a woman by the name of Suzanne Campy on about a year and a half ago on our podcast. And she is a retirement coach, but does nothing with
Mhm.
money. It is all around this concept of CPR, which I'm definitely going to use that again. But how do I continue to let my mind work when I'm not going to work? How do I continue to get that fellowship in that community when I'm not sitting next to somebody in a cubicle or on the same team as them trying to accomplish a goal? And it was a really important episode for us. And the work she does is very important because of um, that all changes.
We spend a good third to half of the book talking about those types of things. And it's not because we are dismissing traditional concepts around the percentage you need or some of the basics around saving and investing. We still believe, obviously, in many of those basic principles. But what we find is there's just such a lack of planning back to the whole first chapter, which is about what is your relationship with money? Where do you want to find purpose? And so we really devote a lot of time to some of those things. And it's everything from, will you have a phased retirement, which is becoming a bigger concept that we see people embracing, and even some companies having more structured programs around phased retirement. But will you have a phased retirement, or will it be you work one day, the next day you don't work? And then again, where do you find these different things? So we spend a lot of time talking about for sense of community. Where will you live? Will you live near family? Will you live in more of a planned community? And so all of those different thoughts. And that's
Yeah.
not just because of the financial aspect of, hey, will I have a mortgage and do we need to put that into our worksheet? But it's also because, are you going to have a place where you can find sense of community in your home and in your home life? We talk about even having a pet in retirement and what's that like? Because for some people, that creates a sense of purpose and a sense of companionship.
Yeah.
So, those are the types of things that, again, they're not financial in nature. They might seem more like the softer skills, but also that's where working, with a coach or, well, someone like you who is able to talk people through and plan for these things, it helps to think about them sooner than waiting until you're 65 and on your second day of retirement.
Right. Well, and to get to the P, the purpose part of that CPR analogy, just my commercial for helping the youth of this country. There's a lot
Yeah.
of programs that need volunteers to help kids, help teach kids things, help when it comes to sports and things with kids. That I hope a retiree listening to this says, I love playing Little League Baseball when I was a kid. I want to go back and coach and help kids get what they're supposed to from Little League and from sports, because there's so many opportunities for this younger generation to tap into just the wealth of knowledge that retirees have that I think will start helping the sense of community, not just when they're retired, but overall. So that's just my little soapbox moment there for a second.
No, I think, that purpose part is big, right?
Right.
If it's volunteering. So, both of my parents are retired, and we've gone through this process of, "Okay, mom and dad, what are you gonna do with your time now?" And my mom, and I don't know, Will, if you have, similar experiences, but my mom had a full agenda of things to do within a week of retirement, right? She's volunteering here, she's got this girlfriend group there, and all these activities. My dad, that is not his style. He likes to ride his bike and do some things like that, but he didn't have his full set of activities, and so it was an interesting experience to help them get to a place where my dad found that volunteering at the food pantry twice a week, that gave him something. He had to be there on time, he was needed, and it gave him that sense of purpose. And so
Yeah.
I think those volunteer things, be it, at a church, a community outlet, little league sports, there's so many mentorship, so many different opportunities. And I think sometimes there's a feeling of, hey, I'm too old for this. My opinions won't be valued, but it's such an opportunity to give back to those next
Yes.
generations that are craving for that mentorship and guidance.
Yeah, and I think their opinions would be more valuable than I think they give themselves credit for, because there's
Agreed.
a lot of, just with the changing landscape of education, there's a lot of things these kids aren't learning in school that were commonplace when they were in school, that they can maybe help bridge that gap in a lot of regards. Again, like I said, you don't have to get very deep into this book to find a lot of things that impact you. And going right to the second chapter, and don't worry, everybody, we're not going to go through all 125 chapters. I'm going to leave some of that up to you. But our proprietary process for our office is called the navigation formula. And we talk about how your job is to know, by you, our client's job is to know where they are now and ultimately where they would like to be. And we spend a lot of time talking about their current financial situation and then ideally what they want. And again, it's not just retirement, what they want college funding to look like, or what they want estate or something to look like. And then we do everything in the middle, kind of like a financial GPS. Your second chapter talks about success not being a straight path, but the image is incredible because it shows a road and it shows market loss and job loss and different kinds of setbacks. And that's exactly what we say. This is why we do this process, because the trajectory is never going to be straight up and to the right. It is always going to be a winding path, and the market is not going to be the only thing that throws us for a loop sometimes. And the image that you guys used here is incredible. It's spot on, and it's one that I hope my peers are using when they explain what this looks like to folks.
Well, it's so much more than about retirement, it's about life in general,
Right.
and, so I popped it open so that I could grab a quote that I like from that one, because it's, more than 50% of successful retirees didn't get there without a few bumps, bruises, and extraordinarily challenging moments along the way. And I think a lot of times, especially with things like social media now, we look around and it's like everyone looks like they've got it all figured out,
Right.
right? And so that can be really that can kind of create this, like, fear of missing out, the I'm not doing it well enough. But I think it is really important to think about it two ways. One, what does success actually look like for you? Because success for you might be very different than success for someone else. And then also thinking about, a lot of times, that successful photo you see in the end, it's not showing, like the quote just said, all of the bumps and bruises along the
Right.
way, the starting over because of some sort of, job loss, or starting over because of loss of a partner. There's a lot of things that happen. And that's one of the reasons we talk about this kind of sketchbook approach, is that it's the idea that you have to be really dynamic in your planning, and you have to be dynamic from an early on point. You can have a financial plan, but it's not a one and done. It's about
Right.
empowering, working with great advisors like you will, but then really giving that paintbrush or that pencil to the client to say, this is where I'm trying to go. I love how you positioned, your proprietary planning process, because it's, this is where I want to go. We can help you get there, but they have to really help be the artist in their own
Right.
journey, because it's not a straight path. And we don't always know the bumps that will happen. Some we can anticipate, but some we don't even know.
Well, and the best analogy to a GPS if you're on the road and traffic is moving fine, kids are asleep in the back, and you think, okay, we're going to be home in a few hours. And then your GPS starts telling you, we're going to reroute you. And you're like, why? You don't even know what's coming. And then you look at Google Maps and it says, well, yeah, there's an accident up ahead and we're going to reroute you to keep you on this path. And that's what's so important for our profession is not just responding, but being proactive to keep folks on that path.
Mhm.
And that image is I think we've got to figure out a way to buy that and put it in our office somewhere. So that it's a great
We'll just
analogy and a
send
great
it to
okay.
you.
There's a lot of other concepts that go into retirement and that you get into in the book. Um, I do want to talk about a few concepts. For example, Social Security. Social
Mm.
Security is a very, very challenging program to describe. It sounds like a lot of double talk, and you guys illustrate that. Let's talk a little bit about the chapters about Social Security and why that was so important to you guys.
When you think about Social Security, to your point, it is between the decisions around, healthcare in retirement as well as Social Security and when to take it. Those are the
Mhm.
two biggest things that I hear.
Yes.
It's like, I wasn't as prepared as I wanted to be. I didn't realize it was going to be this complicated. And so, talking about Social Security, there's a lot of different levers. And again, we just start to introduce the concept, ask some questions to consider, and really encourage working with an advisor, someone like you will, to help make those decisions. Because for some people, delaying taking Social Security really is the best option. But that doesn't mean that's a one size fits all for everyone because different reasons may impact someone's decision. Maybe it's their own health history, their family health history, where they say, no, it makes more sense for me to take it early on. I don't want to delay it, even though I ultimately might get a larger amount in the long run.
Right. Well, and not only that, how other decisions now impact Social Security. You know, being 5 years into retirement, and this is an example I use all the time because it happened. Being 5 years into retirement, collecting Social Security, taxes are set, Medicare premiums are set. Now I need a new car. You know what? I don't want to deal with the hassle of having a car payment. I'm just going to take a big distribution from my IRA and pay cash for that car. And that could be a very expensive car that the interest rate may have been less expensive than what is going to happen to your taxes on Social Security and your Medicare and IRMA surcharges because of that big distribution. And did you cover? I see the chapter about IRMA. I have the book open in front of me. Um, is a great analogy about how Medicare isn't free. And
Mhm.
did you guys discuss that and cover that in detail?
We do cover that in the book, and again, one of the things we try to I've talked about this in terms of, like, there's different levers, right? So we
Right.
try to talk about it to your point of, it's all dependent on someone's personal situation and the different things that impact these decisions, but it can be, what is your tax situation? How are you handling other accounts and RMDs? You know, what is it that you have from a spending perspective? Big spends coming up. What is your healthcare cost and things related to healthcare? Do you have a partner or not? So all of those things can be those levers that we have to pull when making decisions around Social Security.
Yes. And simply taking a bigger distribution to pay cash for the car may be a very expensive decision that needs analysis before it's just send me my money so I can go buy my car.
Yes. Yeah. I think one of the things that we forget sometimes is we have short-term needs that can create blind spots to some of the longer term impacts. And so one of the things we try to do in the book, of course, is we are not giving comprehensive chapters on each of these topics. But what we're
Right.
trying to do is help you to think about, at least put the question in your head, oh, I'm aware of this concept. I better go ask for more information and also introduce how these concepts are interrelated many times. And so some of those, what I called, like, the hidden corners that you don't want to trip over, they know at least hey, let's go ask Will before I actually take this action. Don't ask him after the fact
Right.
or notify after the fact.
Right. Um, the book covers a concept called peak 65. Can you talk a little bit about what that is and why the next decade is probably unlike any retirement we've ever seen before?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about this a little bit already when we've talked about like kind of this new generation we're in,
Yeah.
right? So, we were starting to talk about that a little bit, but I think it's 2024 through 2027. So, right when we're living, right,
Right
is
now.
what's called this peak 65 zone. And so, this is the time when more than ever, we're going to see the biggest number of people who are retiring that we've seen in recent history. And I can't remember the exact numbers of what that is from the book, but the idea is like during this window right now, more than ever, we have more people retiring than we've ever had retire before. So, kind of as you were describing earlier, it is this opportunity for the next generation to learn from this generation, but also in this generation, it creates a lot of different dynamics just for us to be aware of as a society in terms of we have more people learning how to go through decumulation. Do we have the right tools and resources for these groups? Do we have all of the right social structures to make that work? So I think, one of the things to just be aware of is that we've never had this many people retiring all at the same time, which will go through about 2027.
Yeah. And then it's Gen X's turn. Then it's
Yeah.
our turn.
Yeah.
So, what's your favorite concept that you guys covered when it comes to your retirement sketchbook?
Well, that's easy for me because my favorite one is the one about, having a pet in retirement. Because I have two dogs. And so I have no children, but I have two dogs. And so for me, that's a big one because it symbolizes so much more, but it's symbolizing where do you get this sense of companionship, which again, we talk about this and share some stats in the book about, those who have a companion, they have something that gives them purpose. Back to our point, it really gives you some reason to get up every day in retirement. I love that we talk about planning for taking care of your pet after you're deceased and those types of things, but that's probably my favorite one. Another one we do touch on, which I think is often very, very missed, is your digital footprint and basically planning for. So the book goes in an arc. And so we're going from your relationship with money to saving to investing to your retirement income plan to all the way to the last chapter, which is basically planning for end of life decisions. And part of that is you have this big digital footprint. How are you taking care of that? It's going beyond just your trust and estate planning, but your digital footprint now becoming a part of that.
Right.
And I think many of us have taken the first step of getting a trust or their will set up. That next kind of layer where do you know what the plan is for all of your passwords and all of those things? Do you have that house in order so that you're not leaving your loved ones with a mess? I think that's a topic that is a great one to bring up for folks.
Yes, and undervalued. If you've ever gone through that, I mean, sitting on our side of the table, helping families go through an estate, it's overwhelming to begin with, and those are things that really don't need to be overwhelming. How do I close my dad's Facebook account? Well, they're going to make it harder for you than that. Well, maybe not then necessary. Maybe they make it hard for a reason because they want his privacy to be secure. But it's something that's easy to get out in front of,
Yep.
um, and isn't done enough, and it can really remove that sense of overwhelmingness. Okay, we have some rapid fire questions to hit you with, if that's okay. Nothing too invasive, I promise. First, one thing someone can do this week to improve their retirement picture.
One thing you could start doing this week, no matter where you are in the process, is you could make sure you're just sitting down and talking to one other person who your retirement impacts. It might be your partner, it might be your children, it might be a parent, but sit down and have a conversation with someone about your retirement so it's top of mind and you're starting to think about it.
Yes, great advice. What's the most common retirement myth you want to permanently rid the world of?
Oh, that you have to have some specific number or that you have to have some specific percentage. You see all kinds of things back to your point earlier about, carrying around the number. There is no set, you must have the 4% rule. It's not a one fit size fits all because
Sure.
we all want different things.
Yes. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's the logo or the slogan of our firm are wealth strategies that revolve around you, and that's that can't be closer to the truth and closer to our heart is because everybody's retirement is different. There is no rule of thumb or one size fits all, and I'm glad that you focused on that. Okay, finish this sentence. Retirement planning should feel less like blank and more like blank.
Less like a heavy weight and more like a joyful experience, something to be looked forward to.
Yes, love it. And finally, who should read this book? Give me one specific person or one specific scenario that you wrote this book for.
Oh, really, anyone should read this book who's age 25 to 85.
Okay.
There's a topic in there for everyone, and that's the point, is it's a dinner table book that you can pick up and put down at any age.
Well, and I'm going to take that a step further. Every one of my peers should have this book in their office on their bookshelf. They should have more than one copy so they can gift it to their clients or folks that they're working with, but have a copy that they can help use to explain the concepts that they're trying to help their clients with, because these illustrations will make all of that so much easier and help set folks on a much stronger and more confident trajectory when it comes to the retirement. So if you're listening to this and you're another advisor, get this book, get it on your bookshelf, get multiple copies so that you can gift them to your clients so that you have an easy way to explain these concepts to your folks that you're working with and helping them navigate retirement. Bonnie, anything else we should have asked you that we maybe didn't?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to be on the show. And I love, some of the things that you've shared about the individual nature of your practice, how you're really making it about, human focused, you focused. I love that. So I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to get to connect with you and to get to learn more
Likewise.
about your work as well.
Yeah, I already am looking forward to having you on the show again, especially when the next book comes out, right?
We'll see about that.
Well, again, the book is Your Retirement Sketchbook. Bonnie, where can listeners find the book?
You can go into Barnes and Noble and buy it off the
Yes.
shelf, or probably, yeah, I was going to say, or a little easier is probably just buying it off of Amazon.
Yes, but if your delivery doesn't show up as anticipated, Barnes and Noble has them on their bookshelf, which was a savior this morning, so that we could have a copy over our shoulder to show our listeners what the cover looks like. Where can our listeners follow you to get more insight or anything that you guys are doing in the moment?
Yeah, we have a website, endeavor-retirement.com. And also you can follow me on LinkedIn, named Bonnie Treichel. And we look forward to sharing more of our resources about the book and then other things about planning for retirement.
Tremendous. Thank you so much again. As always, you can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. If you have any questions about anything you've heard here, please chat us up on LinkedIn. Visit our website, hoffmanwealth.com. And until the next time, please remember to keep your wealth moving. Bonnie Treichel and Endeavor Law are not affiliated with Hoffman Wealth Management and Private Advisor Group. Will Hoffman offers investment advice through Private Advisor Group, which is a federally registered investment advisor. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult with the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision.